Hello there everyone, welcome to the Royfit channel. Today we're going to be talking about the human bones and the skeletal system. Obviously there are over 200 bones in the human body altogether. Now I won't be listing all 200, but what I will be talking about is the ones that you need to know, maybe for your courses or if you're training to be a fitness professional. So we're going to start right at the beginning and talk about bone ossification or osteogenesis. This is the process of bone formation, so basically the early development of the skeletal system. So this all begins roughly in the 3rd week after conception, with the formation of the notochord. The notochord is a rod-like structure on the back of the embryo that later develops into the spine. So this is the spinal cord and the brain. Now in the 4th week, the first signs of arms and legs start to show, and between the 5th and 8th week, the limbs, so this is like the arms, the hands, the fingers, the legs, the feet, the toes, all begin to extend and take their shape. Babies' bodies are all born with roughly 300 bones, sometimes a bit more or less. Now this is dependent on genetic factors, but they do not stay as 300 bones our whole life. As we grow, a lot of these bones fuse together, such as bones in our cranium, our feet, our hands, our sternum and our vertebrae. Now this fusing of the bones stops around the ages of 18 and 26 years old, so roughly when you stop growing. By this point we are left with between 200 and 216 bones. Again, this varies due to your genetics. Now then, the actual skeleton itself has been split up into 2 categories. So you've got the axial skeleton, which includes the skull, the neck, the spine, the vertebrae columns, the chest bone and the ribs. And then we've got the appendicular skeleton, which includes all the bones from the upper and lower limbs, and this also includes the hips as well. So we'll start off with the bones in the skull and the neck. So this is in the axial region. Now there are many bones just in the head and neck. Many of these bones in the head are actually fused by the time you're adults, and you can see these fusion points along the skull. Now you won't need to learn all of these bones unless you're a medical professional, but if you're a fitness or sports professional then you need to know the following. So the cranium is made up of the cranial bones and the facial bones, so basically bones that form the eye sockets, nose, cheek, jaw and parts of the face. Located at the back of the skull is an opening where the spinal cord connects to the brain. So the spinal column, known as the cervical, which is the neck area of the spine. The vertebrae that protect the spinal cord and cervical are made up of 7 cervical vertebrae. Now these are numbered C1 to C7. The first vertebra, C1, is a ring-shaped atlas that connects directly to the skull. Now basically what this joint does is it allows for the nodding motion, the yes motion. The second vertebra, the C2, is a peg-shaped axis that the atlas pivots around. Now basically what this joint allows is side-to-side motion, so that would be like the no. Now it goes without saying damage to these areas is very serious. So we'll now move on to the spine. So this is the rest of the spine after the cervical. So the spine is made up of 5 areas. One we have already spoken about, the cervical, so being the neck. The remaining 4 are the thoracic, so this is your mid-back, your lumbar, which is your lower back, sacrum, which is the hip bone, and then we've got the coccyx region, which is your tailbone. Now the thoracic, or the mid-back, the main function of the thoracic spine is to hold onto the rib cage and to protect the heart and lungs. The 12 thoracic vertebrae are numbered T1 to T12. Now the range of motion in this area of the spine is very limited. Now then, we've got the lumbar, which is the lower back, pretty easy to remember, L, lumbar, lower back, L. The main function of the lumbar spine is to bear the weight of the body, or when you're doing like heavier lifts. So the 5 lumbar vertebrae are labelled L1 to L5. So these vertebrae are much larger than the ones before it, as they have to absorb a lot more stress when lifting or carrying heavy objects. So we've now come on to the sacrum. Now the main function of the sacrum is to connect the spine to the hip bone, so the iliac. There are 5 sacral vertebrae which are fused together. Together with the iliac bone, they form a ring called the pelvic girdle. And lastly, for the spine, we've got the coccyx region. Now again, these are 4 fused bones of the coccyx or tailbone, known as the coccygeal vertebrae. Now what this does is this provides attachments for ligaments and muscle for your pelvic floor. As you can see here by this little diagram, you've got the neck here, which is your cervical, you've got the mid-spine, which is your thoracic, you've got your lumbar lower spine, sacrum right here, and then this tiny bit here is your coccyx. And if you look on the other side here, we've just got another diagram of your vertebrae. So we're now going to move on to the bones of the chest. So this is the remaining axial skeleton. So the last part of the axial skeleton is the chest/rib cage. The rib cage consists of 24 ribs or 12 pairs that protect the lungs, and one central bone called the sternum, and the ribs that extend from it. So there are 3 types of ribs: the true ribs, the false ribs, and the floating ribs. The sternum is comprised of the manubrium / the clavicle notch. So this is where the clavicle joins onto your chest, and obviously the main sternum body. And then it ends with a xiphoid process, which is kind of like this little triangle shape right at the bottom here. And we've also got the costal cartilage, which is the bony cartilage that the ribs extend from, which is this area here. Now as you can see here, we've got the manubrium, and the clavicle notches, we've got the sternum, and then at the bottom we've got the xiphoid process. Obviously here we have the costal cartilages, and then coming off of that, the actual ribs themselves. Now then, we're going to move on to the appendicular skeleton, specifically the shoulder and upper limbs. So the shoulder bones, or also known as the shoulder girdle, is made up of the scapular bone, also known as the shoulder blade, the clavicle, known as the collarbone, and the acromion process. And this makes a ball and socket synovial joint. So as you can see here, we've got the clavicle, we've got the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, we've got the humerus here that joins into, and then we've got the acromion, which is that little one right there. So we're now going to move on to the limb, or your arm. So you've got the humerus, which is this bone here. So the humerus from the upper limb connects to these bones in the shoulder girdle. The humerus then connects to the elbow, which by the way is a hinge joint, joined by the radius and the ulna. Now the notch in your elbow is known as the olecranon, which is joined to the ulna. Now these bones here at the elbow don't allow for rotation. The rotation actually happens down at the pivot joint in the wrist. As you can see here, you've got the humerus from the upper body, you've got the olecranon, which is joined onto the ulna here, and then the radius. Now the hand is comprised of 27 bones. You've got the carpals, which is the wrist. This counts for 8 of them. You've got the metacarpals, or the bones in your palm. This contains 5. The remaining 14 are digital bones, fingers and thumbs. These are known as phalanges. So you can see here, you've got your phalanges, which are your fingers. You've got your metacarpals, which are the bones in the centre. You've also got smaller carpal bones around the wrist as well, and that join on to the radius and the ulna. The only area left now of the appendicular skeleton is the pelvic and lower limbs. So the pelvis is made up of two ilium bones that are joined together at the base of the spine, so at the sacrum, and consist of the iliac crest, the iliac spine, acetabulum, ischium, pubic arc, also known as the pubis. So as you can see here, we've got the two iliums coming in here. You've got the pubis down here, you've got the ischium, iliac crest and iliac spine. Joining onto the hip is your leg bone, known as the femur. This is joined to the pelvic by, again, a ball and socket synovial joint, like our shoulder and humerus. The femur then joins at the knee with the kneecap, which is called a patella, which is a synovial joint. Then again onto the tibia and fibia, which are your lower leg bones, as shown here. And now lastly, we've come to the ankle and the foot. Now the ankle joint is a type of synovial hinge joint. The tibia and fibia join to the foot here, where they'll meet the heel bone, also known as the calcaneus. Oh, and also the talus, which is just at the front of that. So the foot also consists of 26 bones, and is structured much like our hands, consisting of tarsals, metatarsals and phalanges, as you can see here. That's basically all you need to know about your skeleton if you're looking to be a fitness professional. Now today I touched lightly on a few types of joints. I didn't touch at all on anatomical planes, and that's because they are quite big subjects on themselves, so I will be making another video on them. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've learned something new today. Same as always, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.